didn't always have this beautiful smile. No, once a long, long, long time ago, I had baby teeth. Now, I know what you are all thinking. Man, baby teeth? That must have been absolutely horrible. How did you deal with having baby teeth and having them all fall out one by one? Well, my friends, it was made a little bit easier by that little bit of monetary compensation that I got every time I lost a new tooth. You see, I don't really remember my parents telling me too much about the tooth fairy, so even if they did, obviously I didn't believe in it as much as, say, Santa, which I very well remember the devastation of learning he wasn't real. So the tooth fairy for me was never a major factor, and it was more just kind of cool to lose the baby teeth and to put them in a little bag and to bring them to my parents. In fact, I remember one time I was at this assembly and I was wiggling one of my teeth because I was kind of bored, and it actually came out, and I remember raising my hand in the assembly in elementary school and being like, I have a tooth! And then having to go all the way up to the principal's office where they had the doctor's office right across from there, and they had this little envelope type thing, a little brown envelope that they gave me for my tooth, and I felt very special because, I put the entire assembly kind of on hold because I lost my tooth. I was very proud of myself for that whole thing. But as I got a little bit older, when I got to about 5th grade, I was, biking along, and my mom knows a different version of this story, the story that I told her to hide the fact that I was a stupid kid. But essentially what happened, the truth of what happened, is I was biking, and I was bringing my handlebars to and fro and enjoying the fact of how I could swerve. And I was swerving in this pattern that was like at first big, and then I started tightening it up. And then eventually I tried to do this really quick swerve, and that caused me to fall down and chip my front tooth, my right front tooth to be exact. And when that happened, I was a bit embarrassed, and my mom was very distressed. And so instead of telling her that the reason that I broke my tooth was because I was trying the limits of how much I could swerve and how little of a distance, I told her that I swerved to avoid a rock, which is completely false. There was no rocks involved. But anyways, I ended up chipping my tooth. And when this happened in 5th grade, it was the coolest thing ever, because I was able to go up to everyone the next day, and everyone wanted to know what the heck happened. They were all super curious, and I was ready to tell them. And of course, I told them the rock story, but I also told them a fake story about getting into a fight. I told them all manner of stories, some involving aliens, some involving superheroes. All of the people from my elementary school probably no longer trust me if they ever look back on their memories, because I told a lot of wild stories. But I very much enjoyed being the center of attention, and I was pretty bummed out when later that week we ended up getting it filled. Now, the dentist said that filling was going to last approximately 6 months, when I should come back in to get a permanent tooth to put in. And so I waited that 6 months, and then after the 6 months, I was like, it's still fine. I don't have any problems with it. And I waited. And so I waited a year, and then I waited 2 years, and I kept on waiting. And I completely forgot about it, pretty much. The only times that I would ever think about the fact that I had this little filling in my tooth was whenever an apple came into the picture. In fact, it was one of my favorite 2 truths and a lie things to use, because no one believed it. The fact that I have a chipped tooth would always be one of my truths, and it was a very useful thing to have. Anyways, I go all the way through middle school, go almost all the way to high school, all the way to my final round of AP testing. And I have taken at this point a ton of AP tests that year. I think the total was 5. And so this test AP Econ just happened to be the last test of all of my AP tests that year. And that was a darn good thing because this test was so hard, it broke my tooth. And I'm not even kidding. Okay, it's a bit of a weird situation, but essentially what happened is I'm taking the test, there's a desk right in front of me, and I kind of lean and I go like this, and then all of a sudden I feel something in my mouth, which I can tell you is one of the most bizarre feelings when you don't expect anything to be in your mouth and then suddenly there is something. And I was just like, what is going on? And then I spit it out and I looked at it. And right there was my filling that I had gotten all of those years ago. In 5th grade, it came out in 12th grade. And it was like, oh my gosh. It was the weirdest feeling. And so I ended up having to finish that part of the exam with my tooth in my hand, in my left hand, so I could write and bubble in. And then we had a little break because you see AP tests tend to be broken up into 2 sections that you get a nice little break in between. And our teacher was nice enough to provide with us this huge buffet type thing of snacks, and there were gummies and granola bars and water bottles and all of this fantastic stuff that I would typically love to just dig into, but I'm over here I have a tooth in my hand, and if I say a word, everyone's gonna start wondering what the heck happened to me. So the first thing I did was go up to my proctor and go, my tooth came out, and they look at the tooth and they look at me and they're like, oh, because again, it's one of my 2 front teeth. It's a very visible thing that has happened. It's very difficult to ignore, and I can feel all this time the wind that comes in and out of my mouth, and I can feel the pain and irritation of it, and it was just very, very odd. And so I ended up going to one of my friends in that test at the break and telling them, and they're like, oh my gosh. It was just the best thing. All of a sudden, all those memories of how cool it was to have chipped a tooth in 5th grade came rushing back to me, and all of a sudden I was oversharing to pretty much everyone the fact that I had this problem. And it was so funny. Everyone was like, are you okay? Do you need to leave? Do you need to not finish this test and take the makeup test? And I was just like, no. I want to finish the test because I did not want to have to think about this anymore. I wanted to be done with this test. I wanted to be done with everything. So I was like, no, we're going to finish it. So we went back into the room, did the written portion of the test, and right after that, I go to the class that's after that, and I just straight up call my parents. I'm like, guys, yeah, the filling came out, and I swear there was probably a little bit of a pause on the phone as they were like, wait, filling? What? And then they were like, oh, and we're gonna meet you over there in a few minutes. So I ended up going and meeting up with my parents, and we ended up going to all the dentists and getting their prices and everything. And then we got the timeline, and we had a trip to Europe that was planned about a week from the day of this test, and this was a huge problem because to get the final tooth, they needed a month or so. They needed a long time period to get it all set up, and they were going to give me a temporary. And so I was like, okay, fine, we'll go ahead and do that, use the temporary for the Europe trip, and then everything will be great, right? So I ended up going through with the temporary, and it didn't take a week of the Europe trip for the temporary to fall out. And I don't know if I use my teeth more aggressively in the way I eat than most people, but that temp was garbage, especially compared to that filling that lasted so long. I think this was just my tooth karma, really, because I had so much good luck with the filling that this temporary just did not want to stay. And so it just fell out one day when I was eating something and in our hotel room, and I was like, well, that's a problem. And so then we end up going to one of the pharmacies in the next place that we end up to get some cement to put it back on and to get it to stick. And we try that, and it doesn't work very well because it just ends up coming out not that same day, but the next day. And the whole process of doing the cement takes about 30 minutes. It's not very pleasant. I can tell you that putting this piece of like plasticky thing and pushing it up on your sensitive tooth is just not a thing that you want to do ever. And I did this multiple times until we ended up just completely giving up on it. So for the rest of the Europe trip, I was just the toothless wonder. I just had this hole in my mouth for the rest of the trip, and it was very bizarre, but I ended up getting used to it, and then eventually when we ended up coming back home, I was finally able to get the real permanent tooth, which I've been waiting on since 5th grade, arguably. And so that's where I am today. I'm back in my prime, I guess, of toothy life. I don't have to worry about ever having to get that certain one replaced again. I might have problems in the future, but not for now. And, braces, Invisalign, whatever, lucked out there. Never had to deal with them, so sucks to be you guys, but I'm glad that I'm not. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know your tooth problems down in the comments below, and like this video if you enjoyed it. Anyways, I hope that you all soar high and enjoy your ride of life. Bye!